Hello and welcome to the Association for Coaching podcast. My name's Darren Robson and I'm your host for this health and wellbeing series. Today I'm really pleased to have Soraya on the call with me. So lovely to see you.
Hello, and lovely to be with you too.
So Soraya, we've known each other for a very long time, right at the very beginning of the AC, as I recall. Is that right?
Yeah, we have. We've known each other with Catherine for what must be 18 years. So a long, long time. We were little newbies back in those days.
Oh gosh, don't add years to us. That's fantastic. Now, I'm really looking forward to this because we've not seen each other for a long time. And I know that you've added to your executive and leadership coaching skill sets, and you've really deepened your insight around neuroscience and positive resilience mindsets. So why don't you share with us who you are and where you've got to in the coaching world, and then we'll deep dive into the neuroscience aspects.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. My love of the brain, I suppose, is a good place to start. From a child, I was always really quite curious about other people and what we were thinking, what was going on in our heads. And so my early career was in advertising, so creative advertising and things that you used to see on TV that you don't see anymore, really great ideas and creativity. And really the heart of that was all about how we as human beings actually operate and how we create the future and the world that we want. So I've always been absolutely fascinated by that. And then I had one of those eureka moments when coaching first started and decided to train as a coach. And I have to be quite honest, I wasn't really totally quite sure what it was. But I did psychology in America and I've always loved psychology. So it was a very natural sort of path for me to go down. And then, as you know, the whole coaching field profession took off. The AC started. I did all my training with Dr. David Rock. So it was always brain-based. And I liked the kind of structure and the process that he had to it, even though I'm not a structured and process person. And then from there, I just developed my practice, worked with some amazing clients, wonderful people across all different, the creative industries, professional services, people starting out to very senior people. I've always really loved working with women, especially around female leadership. And I think it's quite important where we are today with COVID and everybody just having this juggling act at the moment of trying to work, but also trying to bring up their families. And I think there's a lot of pressure around that. And I find that very interesting. And then I wanted to do a master's, but I wasn't really quite sure in what. And I waited to see what came up. And then I did with the AC a course with Professor Paul Brown on neuroscience and completely had that moment again of, right, this is what I want to learn. So I started the MSc 2016, 2017. And it was the most wonderful and most hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I'm quite glad I didn't know how hard it was because perhaps I wouldn't have started, but I'm glad I did. And there was 21 of us, I think, when we started. And now there's two of us. There's a guy in Australia and there's me who's actually got the MSc. And it was really hard work. It was like learning a completely new language, which I suppose in many ways it was. And then actually the real challenge, I think, for us is actually how you apply it. So as well as learning the kind of neurobiology of the brain, and it's actually how we as coaches can actually apply it for our clients in their day-to-day life and really help them to optimize this amazing organ that's in our head that I think we all completely just take for granted. It's just there.
Well, wonderful. It sounds like a really enriching journey you've been on. So when you think about neuroscience and neurobiology, what are some of the kind of core principles and some of the fundamentals that you think as coaches, we really need to be aware of?
I think one of the core ones is actually all around, I think, two things. There's around our whole sense of perceptions and how our brain actually gets the information and the knowledge that it does. But I think the most important one is the neuroplasticity and the neurogenesis. So this whole, we're all taught that, you can't teach old dogs new tricks, we can't change. But actually, by the time we reach 50, all our neurons in our brain will have replenished themselves. So they're all new neurons, new thoughts, new emotions, new ideas, new. And I find that really exciting that actually so often people believe that they're set in the way that they are and how they have to behave and how they live their life. And actually it's just not true because we have this wonderful ability to learn and to grow and to develop and to focus, which is what the brain absolutely loves. And it's so enriching, it's so healthy for us. And I find that the most important thing that I think as coaches we need to really understand to be able to help our clients to develop and grow in the ways that they want to.
No, wonderful. And it's great to be a bit of a myth buster around that sort of thing as well. Is there any link then, and maybe I'm declaring something here in myself, but is there anything as we head towards 50 then, and midlife crisis, I think they call that, don't they?
I thought that was 40, but he moved it to the 50 now. That's better. That's much better. Yeah, I think there's a whole load of myths around having these midlife crises. We are what we are, and we have so many opportunities today. It's really very exciting. But I think you probably do when you reach perhaps 50, you've brought up your children, you've actually got your life back in a way, you've got your freedom. It certainly happened for me, hence doing the masters, where I could actually refocus back on myself again. I think through life, we're on these different points in our life, and therefore different journeys and different things that we want to achieve and we want to do. And as you get older, actually, there's a beautiful freedom that comes with it. You're replenishing by the time you reach 50, and being able to focus on something new and something different, I think is very exciting, because the older people get, and all generations, there's just so much to add. It's such a rich melting pot that we all are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what else are some of the kind of key insights around the practical takeaways that coaches can learn? So I've heard about neuroplasticity. What are some of the other kind of real useful practical tools for people?
I think some of the practical things are really helping people understand how much we're actually just some of the main networks in the brain, and the different areas of the brain, that people don't like us talking about the trion brain because it was developed, or the theory was put forward quite a long while ago, but it's a very interesting and easy to explain to people how their brain is. We have the neocortex, the new part. Then you have the sort of feeling, the central mammalian part of the brain, and then the old, some would say, the reptilian part. And really understanding those core functions within those parts of the brain, I think is very important. And also the main networks. So, for instance, with resilience, your brain is always scanning for danger. That's what it does. That's how we all survive. And anything that comes into the thalamus and then activates or alarms actually the hippocampus and the amygdala, and will actually shut down our thinking part of the brain. And I think at the moment, for everything that people are going through, the brain, we all hate uncertainty, and unfortunately for the past years, that's really all we've had is uncertainty. So helping people to recognize their emotions and the perceptions that their brain has around uncertainty, and just changing the schema really of their life, the way that you've looked at your life and you wanted to develop, and all of a sudden something so completely out of our control has taken over. Really, the key thing it does is absolutely exhaust the brain, and it exhausts us as people, which is why a lot of people are talking about being so tired at the moment. And, we're looking at burnout and a lot of poor mental wellness. Really, that's down to the brain just burning up energy, trying to make sense of everything that we're going through. So I think at the moment, for us as coaches, it's very much helping our clients to take some of the pressure off themselves, and actually some self-care, and reframing what is actually happening to them, and where the opportunities might be, and where the learnings might be, and that actually this is an opportunity to look at life and look at their lives very differently and learn from it. So I think it's a very difficult time, but it's a very rich time as well. And I think that's where coaching is so well placed to really support our clients in whatever walks of life they're in, to actually develop and grow with. I hope that all made sense. It felt very rambly to me.
No, yeah, it makes absolute sense to me. I think one of the things that we're picking up on this series around health and well-being is around the importance of getting out in nature and daily habits. So what are some of the thoughts that you've got? And when you're considering this response, Soraya, if you think, because I think there's a number of factors. So I think we're always great as coaches to try and help other people and our clients. And actually, I think there's a real, to pick up on the point you made about self-care for you as a coach. So what are some of the self-care tips that you think we should be offering coaches that help with resilience? And then, what else? How do you help clients to go, this is, I'm feeling this. How do they capture those feelings and learn from those feelings?
I think that's a really good question. I think we're probably I would say there's the luckiest points of generations where nutrition, exercise, mindfulness, coaching, self-learning, all of it coming together, and it's lost its sort of perhaps fluffy connotations that it might have had 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and now it's very mainstream because of science and because of our real shift in attitudes, actually, as cultures. So for me, I think that it has to be, to use the word holistic, we have to look after our diet really well. We have to feed the brain. Not many people perhaps start their breakfast and think, what does my brain actually need today? We think about what our body needs, but I think we need to have a much more holistic view and think about what does my brain actually need. I think your diet becomes very important. As you said, exercise, the research around the values, the neurotransmitters that are released when we're doing exercise are just extraordinary. It's an amazing tool that we have that can really enrich us and make us feel so much, really, really help our well-being. And then the whole mindfulness, whether that's meditation, whether that's mindfulness, whether that's just deep breathing, all of it is actually what we're trying to do. If we think about the nervous system, and we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of the nervous system which is activated when it feels stress or cortisol, or our breathing becomes shorter or our heartbeat gets faster. And that actually then activates the kind of security within our brain that actually something's going wrong. So hence why people get very stressed, why people get anxious. But a lot of it is actually just the neurochemistry that's going on. It's not necessary that we are in danger. It's really about how we see it. So the more that we can look after ourselves in the whole totality and activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the one that's all to do, the nervous part of the nervous system that's to do with relationships, with learning, with laughter, with fun, with great, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, all these wonderful neurotransmitters that really keep us healthy. We need to be mindful of what we're moving towards as opposed to what the brain wants us to move away from, because it considers it dangerous. So it's a lot of, again, where coaching comes in to get us to look at things in very different ways. Our brain is so heavily networked towards our protection that sometimes we just have to give it a little bit of a break and say, do you know what, it's okay. Just let's go for a walk. Let's deep breathe. Let's have some nice fruit or whatever it is. So I do think there's something about actually talking to your brain that becomes really important. It's not just this floating mass that's in your head. You can help direct it the way that you want it to be thinking and to help the way that you behave and what you're feeling. So it's a much more active, I think we need to have a much more active relationship with it than we currently do. And I think we need to just take advantage of all the wonderful care that we can, both for us as coaches and for our clients. You can't divorce the two, to actually help us really live life to its fullest, really, and healthiest, especially with COVID and, what people are going through. So to get some actual pointers is, again, to be out with nature, take some good walks, learn how to relax, listen to music, play, learn something new. Within my group, there's 2 people who are learning the violin, which I really think is quite incredible. It's about caring for other people, recognize if other people are lonely who could appreciate a call or a bunch of flowers or whatever it might be, because you will help them to release really, oxytocin and really positive. You're helping them to look after their health, but equally you get the feedback as well for you as a person that you've actually helped someone, so you get the same benefit. So really looking out for other people, I think, is another really important thing that we need to be aware of. Again, as I've said, learn something new. At the moment, I've just taken up piano, which is something I did when I was at school, and I find it a great way to disappear for half an hour or so into my head and learn something and feel really proud that you can play something and you've achieved it by yourself. And there are some wonderful things that have happened, meeting new people, having great conversations. But there were things that I was just passing over because my mood was just very low. And actually, I think we have to be much more active in how we change that.
Well, that's wonderful. And a lot of your list really reinforces some of the good habits. And I'll certainly look at how we formulate that into a bit of a document for people, because it's really coming through strongly about these daily habits and these micro habits, as I heard somebody share the other day. I love the one that you brought out. So I love the learning one, which was new, so the piano, but also the fun and laughter. The fact that you mentioned fun and laughter, I thought that was really great to hear that. You mentioned a couple of things there. I just wanted to check in. So neurotransmitters. What are neurotransmitters?
Okay, so they're hormones that can be made in the body and in the brain, and they're activated through just the whole physicality of our bodies and what we're feeling and what we're thinking that's coming from the brain. So, for instance, if you're the reason I mentioned sort of laughter and learning is laughter we read so much now that serotonin is so important for our moods. And actually that's released when you're laughing, when you really just your body, you're telling your whole body everything's fine. You can completely relax and it releases all the serotonin. You've got oxytocin, which is one that I'm learning a lot about that I really just, I think it's an amazing neurotransmitter. It's all about our relationships and love and how social we need to be. We're very social creatures, which is quite hard for all of us at the moment not to be. So finding ways to release that, whether it's looking at, taking your dogs for a walk or playing with your children or chatting to your friends, seeing their faces, all these things are just naturally produced in the body and they're there to protect us. And that's where I think when people are feeling stress, or hence even if I could say distress, because there's eurostress and distress, good stress and bad stress, but actually these things protect us. These neurotransmitters protect us. So they're being released in the body. And too often we focus on cortisol on the negative side, but actually they're equally there to say, hey, don't worry, come on, we can get through this together. These neurotransmitters are going to be released, but they're there to be a springboard for you, to actually help you, not to hinder you. And I think too often we have schemas in our mind and memes. You read the newspapers and it's just such doom and gloom that the brain will believe it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And someone else was talking about our negative bias that we've got as human beings. And I think there's something positive in this that you're sharing is around if we can be more aware about the positive and the protective neurotransmitters, so oxytocin, serotonin, and there'll be others, but if we can be more aware of those as coaches for ourselves as human beings, and then also to help promote well-being in our clients, that would be good, wouldn't it? If clients can be more aware.
Oh, definitely. There was a model that I put together. One of my big areas has been well-being, to actually look at well-being, because it's such a subjective area, very subjective, and there is no actual definition for well-being at all. It's really how we feel about our own well-being that's important. But we need to be able to regulate our emotions, which I think is very important, because as you say, we do have a bias towards the dark side, because that's how we've survived as a species, really, and how we will continue to survive. But you do have to help your brain, because it only knows from its own perceptions and its own memories that are laid down whether things are dangerous or they're not dangerous, and actually guiding it and therefore helping to change it, being more aware of our emotions and how we change them becomes very important. And then the whole awareness around what is actually happening. Again, it comes down to the filter, the lens that we want to see the world through, and therefore how we will respond as human beings. That's really what we're doing. So self-awareness and self-regulation become two very core skills that we probably are just so important for us at the moment moving forward.
No, absolutely. And one of the other themes that you've mentioned, so I wanted to pick up on it, was around the need for resilience, which is part of what we were starting to dance around just then. So what's your take on resilience, especially, as we're hopefully coming out of this pandemic? So what's your sense about resilience and what we need to know as coaches and how we can support our clients and others?
Yeah, I think the one thing, resilience, again, like well-being, they're all quite subjective to us as individuals, depending on our culture, knowledge, our experiences, our life. So I think a starting point has always got to be on both well-being and resilience, is actually to establish with our clients what it actually means to them, so that they actually have, because it's another word like well-being, like stress, all these things are words that are kind of thrown around without actually taking the time to sit down and say, well, actually, what does that mean? I'm not quite sure what resilience means. Is it about grit? Is it about determination? Is it about, what is it? And I think helping our clients to actually be able to put a stake in the ground about what it means to them very easily, as we all know, what are the gaps, what's actually missing for them, become a really good tool for them to be able to navigate their well-being and their resilience. And I think it's about, with resilience, it's about asking them what their levels of satisfaction are with life. Do they feel contented? What are their opportunities? What are their purpose? And we know that when people have a purpose in life, they're much healthier overall, mentally and physically, as opposed to if you feel that you have no autonomy, you have no role in life. And our health, again, as we touched on this before, how important that becomes towards resilience. If you're feeling under the weather, if you're feeling ill, then the world is going to look like a very different place to you, a much darker place. Then being able to regulate our emotions, to put them into a constructive and a meaningful way. And as coaches, to help our clients do that, to explain to them the difference between emotions and feelings and how they can actually have much more control over those than perhaps we accept. And I think emotions is an interesting area, because within business, it's only recently do people accept that emotions actually have a huge part to play in all our behaviors, in our cultures and our performance. And then our perceptions in relation to ourselves, to those around us, to what's actually going on. And do you see it through what lens are you actually looking at the world through? What's your lens? Is it more positive? Is it more negative? There was a very interesting study, and I can't quote it all completely, that was done in America over 10 years between a whole group of nuns and monks. And the reason they chose them was that because of the similar lifestyles that they had. And what they found was that those monks and nuns that had a more positive outlook towards life, on average, lived 10 years longer, and that probably was to do with their diets, the way they looked after themselves, etc., etc. Whereas those that had a more negative, and I know we need negative emotions, don't get me wrong, but a darker look on life, actually tended to die earlier and had more brain disease when they looked at them after death. So there's a lot of research around the whole, our perceptions really do drive us. And I think we always tend to, people who talk about the gremlin voice in their head and the whole negativity and the horribleness that we treat ourselves with. And actually, that's just our perceptions. That's our choice about how we want to view things. And there's, again, that's a huge area, and there's a lot of studies that have been done around that. And then, as you said, our awareness, helping people make that connection between their thoughts, their experiences, their responsibilities, their relationships, and actually be very aware of what's truly going on around them, but also the impact they're having on other people. And I think sometimes when we're feeling down and we're protecting ourselves and almost becoming quite like a wounded animal, we'll hit out at other people and hurt them. And pain in the brain is actually, and unfairness actually is a physical pain in the brain. It hurts as much as if someone had kicked you. And I think that's, again, having that awareness of the impact that we're having on other people is very important. And then our rewards in life, rewards, David Rock talks about status. I think status probably is a really important area at the moment within our well-being and our resilience, because if you've lost your job or you're feeling very financially threatened or your family's threatened, that all undermines how you perceive and see yourself as a person. So actually trying to find other rewards in life, like doing more exercise, learning something new, caring, helping other people, all those, almost more spiritual, more feeling, more emotional rewards actually have a very important role to play as well. And then I think the other thing that becomes key is that we've talked about this again, is actually just our diversity in our relationships in life. We are social creatures. We need to belong. We need to feel part of a tribe. We need to be part of the in crowd, as people talk about it, because people become our role models. That's who we learn from. That's people who have similar values to us, similar mindsets. So our relationships and the health of our relationships become very important. And at the moment, not being able to have that physicality that we so value with other human beings, it's finding other ways to find that sort of warmth and kindness and relationships and belonging and conversations and all the things that we need as people to grow and to develop and to feel safe. So all those kind of cultural and ritual habits, it's trying to find ways to recreate those again.
Wonderful. And so are there any, because the thing with neuroscience, from my perspective, is it's in your head. You can't see what's going on. So without walking around with a brain scanner on and understanding the different parts of your brain that are being utilized, how do people understand? What are there any practical tools, journaling or something? What tools can be offered to people to understand how their brain works? Or is it more about looking at their experiences and how they feel about it? How's a way that you can bring it to life for people?
I suppose it depends on all of us. That's the beauty of people, aren't we? We're all so different. We're all so diverse. And because of who we are in our lives and our genetics and everything else, we'll have different ways of approaching this. But I suppose intuition is, again, one of those things which is so undervalued. And I think for most of us, we instinctively get that sense of when we're perhaps not on our top form, when we're not feeling secure. And then conversely, when we are, when you do feel much lighter and that you're you're feeling happy, you're feeling positive, you're feeling confident, feeling competent, all those types of attributes that we have as human beings. There was an interesting article that I read that in America, they did this research last year, and it suggested that 90% of Americans are never bored. And I don't just mean as Americans, I'm not, this is just a study. And I think that in itself is quite interesting. I think we've forgotten, because we have our smartphones and we have so many things that can distract us, we've forgotten how just to sit with ourselves and actually get a sense of who we are and what we're feeling and what we're thinking and what we value, what we don't value. I think we've forgotten or lost touch with really building our own emotional intelligence, because we can always do something. Whereas actually boredom, I suppose a lot of people, if your parents, you brought up to believe that boredom was bad for you, but actually as an adult, it's probably quite nice now and again to get bored and to wallow in your own thoughts. So I think, to your point, I think you can do lots of practical things, but I think just sort of tuning into yourself and taking some time out probably will give you lots and lots of pointers.
Yeah, a couple of people that we've interviewed or I've interviewed on this series have mentioned a study where they've put men and women in a room for 15 minutes and given them basically a tool that can electrocute themselves, not kill themselves, but give them a bit of a shock. And it's quite worrying, because I think it's something in the region of 65-70% of the men and about 25% of the women actually, instead of sitting there for 15 minutes, they actually took the option to give themselves a bit of a shock.
God.
Yeah, the two people have mentioned that independently.
An experience.
Yeah, completely. Which kind of plays to your point about the people are not bored. They're looking for stimulus all the time, and some of that stimulus, as we know, is quite negative. I want to pick up on something else, a couple of things you've said actually, and I want to see if there's anything that links. So you mentioned earlier about the importance of female leaders, and I would maybe go, actually, do you also mean feminine leadership? So I'd love to explore that. And you also mentioned that in organizations, there's a deeper acknowledgement that emotions are important. Is there something you'd like to share about organizational life and emotions, and any links to neuroscience in that?
Yeah, I think Springboard has now been going for 18 years. We've been coaching come for a long time. And I think what I've seen is really the move of companies really trying to really care about, people's well-being and looking. And I suppose the way that I put it is, what we really want is we want everybody to bring all their brains to work. And to be able to do that, you've got to be in an environment with people around you and with leadership that you trust, you feel safe, you feel secure. Because quite simply, if you don't, you're in fight or flight, always looking over your shoulder, you're always worried, your cognitive brain is switched off, you're not really actually thinking, you're relying on your emotions, which aren't negative, because actually that's how we survive. But for companies, I think in leadership, it is really about walking the talk and being genuine, because as human beings, again, we can smell when someone's not being genuine a mile off. And I think that's where the more feminine, it'll be interesting to see how over the next year or so things actually change, because a lot of companies now recognize that they need to be more sustainable, they need to look after their carbon footprint, they need to genuinely care about their staff's well-being and their engagement, and helping people to actually find a voice for themselves. And I think this has developed, it's almost, because we are now in the fourth revolution and we're talking about AI and the way that that's going to change our life, those skills of empathy, being very intuitive, it seems that all the countries that are led by women during COVID have actually responded faster than those more male, and again, I'm getting into male and female, and I don't mean to, have reacted. And again, I wonder whether that comes down to some of that intuitive emotions that we feel. And I'll come on to emotions. And there's something interesting with fight or flight, that they found that women, or those with more feminine qualities, actually tend and befriend. So instead of actually attacking people when they feel threatened, they'll actually embrace them, because they recognize that actually that's a better way to resolve and for people to be also secure and safe, is actually to befriend people, not to fight them. So that's an interesting part of the whole fight or flight system as well. And in terms of emotions, I think we're now talking more about emotions. And again, that comes from the hierarchy of leadership and how that's all changed to be much more networked and much more fluid. And I think we brought our children up very differently. My son's a 30-year-old now, and when he talks, there's a very different world that they're actually in than, say, when I started in business, which was very patriarchal. And I think that people do talk about, we encourage our children to talk about their emotions. We recognize that whilst people would love to think that they do everything logically, of course they do, but underneath it, they're driven by an emotion. We're emotional creatures. That's how we've evolved over millennia to be emotional. And emotions aren't bad. When people will be criticized for bursting into tears or whatever, that's a frustration. That's your way. We all have our, I think it's Maria Feldman-Barrett who talks about constructed emotions. There are core emotions, then each of us will construct our emotions in a different way. It has a different meaning to us, and we'll express it in a different way. And so I think emotions more and more are not being seen as weak and something you don't talk about, but actually they have to be part of the conversation. What are people thinking? What are they feeling? And those feeling parts are who we are, I think, as individuals. And the cognitive bit is always there, and it's, don't get me wrong, it's crucial. But knowing what's actually going on underneath for people is equally as crucial and a great skill of leadership to be able to do it. And I wonder whether women, or those with more feminine attributes, that will become the way forward now. To thrive, we need more flexible and agile cultures. We need to find ways to reshape work moving forward, renewed purpose, more trust, how people can find more balance. The way that it's going to be fascinating to look at what stays and what changes and what remains from the past year that we've had, especially in terms of the agility of work and the melting pot that it's going to be. And I think that's going to take some very different skills and different mindsets to actually approach that. Trust is a lot of people, when people were working from home, it was always about presenteeism and feeling that you had to be, people knew that what you were doing. And now trust has actually stepped in, and people realizing that you can treat people as adults. You don't have to treat them like they're children. They're going to misbehave.
No, 100%. And have you been encouraged then, Soraya, as we're noticing that more and more organisations are talking about mental health and mental well-being?
Oh, God, yeah. It's become part of the fabric of conversation, which is fantastic. I think mental illness, I think it is about mental wellness, and it's about mental well-being, because they do have very different meanings. And if you look at the mental illness is something very different. And I think we have to be careful that we don't confuse those. So mental well-being is very firmly on the agenda. And a couple of years ago, when I started with well-being, 5, 6, 7 years ago, was really not understood at all, and was seen as, again, being quite fluffy and quite a nice to have. But it came out of, well-being really came out of stress management that just didn't work, because it was all about change again, and the huge emphasis on your employees looking after their own stress as opposed to the responsibility of the company. That if people were working under really not tough conditions, people felt very stressed, and realizing that it wasn't the stress management they needed. They actually needed environments and some well-being to help them stay healthy and to stay mentally agile. So I think that once well-being was understood and the different parameters of it and what makes that well-being and how subjective it is for all of us, you want to engage people and you have the duty of care to people. Well-being is just, the way that I see it now, it's just in the fabric of everything that we should be doing.
No, wonderful. And I'm going to go back to something you said at the very beginning around your own journey with the masters that you've done around neuroscience. And I think maybe my hypothesis would be is there's lots of people that feel like you felt, and you pushed through. I can't remember the numbers of people you said that start over 20, I think, and there was only 2 of you that completed it. So what role do you think you've got, and then others that are in a similar role to you, to help bridge that awareness? Because I think you've really brought it to life on this conversation for me. So is there a way that could be translated further, so everyday people like myself and others and business leaders can pick up a guide to neuroscience and go, oh, this is what it's about for me, or this is the neurotransmitters, and this is what I should be looking out for? Is there any sort of resources or any tools out there that really bring it to life in a way that what's in my mind, I'm going to say, is that, Dummy for Neuroscientists, those books, the Dummies guys. Is there any resources out there where it is brought to life in a way that's really digestible for people?
I think it's a really good question, because as I said at the beginning, applied neuroscience is so new. I'm not a brain scientist, I'm not a surgeon or anything like that at all. It is about, how you apply how our brains work so we can really optimize what we've got. And I think, to your point, just with people, I think it's becoming more of the language. Going back to the point we were making before about how mindfulness and nutrition and exercise and sleep and relationships are center stage now, we understand how important they are for us. I think the understanding of how the brain works is being woven around that conversation as well. I think it, in the next couple of years, I think we'll see in schools, it's already taught in schools with children. They're miles ahead of all of us. They really are. So if you want to know a bit more, ask your children, I would suggest. But no, that's a bit flippant. But what I'm meaning is I think there's a lot more information out there than there was. I think there are some you've got people like Professor Brown, you've got Gabia, who was my tutor, whose surname, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce. I can't remember what it is. You've got some wonderful people out there who are writing and talking about neuroscience and actually bringing it to life. And I think it is this whole thing about just creating a relationship with your own brain and mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of us. It's who we are. And it's how we have that relationship with it. Because even I find myself talking about it. And actually, it is my brain. And so my brain is part of me. So it's finding that language that you bring it alive. You make it part of your everyday. You talk to it. Because your brain, it needs the direction. It will take the direction that you give it. So if you give it a direction of, oh my God, we're in real danger, hanker down and let's get out of here, that's what your brain's going to do. If you actually say, hey, hold on a sec, let's put our shoulders back, get our posture, let's take some deep breathing. We can deal with this. We've done it before. Your brain goes, oh yeah, okay, I'm with you. So it sounds very flippant, but it's not flippant. It's how maybe that's at the core of resiliency, about those people who have the ability to see things as a challenge and embrace them, even though they might be really feeling, quite scared or not so optimistic, but actually just view things in that light. To other people who actually worrying is quite a habitual, I know I've done it. I will wake myself up worrying about things just for the sake of worrying because it just feels comforting in some weird way. So I think, again, we have these choices about whether we want to be a challenger and drive our own life forward, or whether we want to just feel that everything's falling and landing on our shoulders.
Yeah, no, it makes real sense. It really does. And I really love that sense of creating a relationship with your own brain. Actually, a bit like more of us, well, especially I'll talk for myself here as I head towards 50 and suddenly I have to worry about everything that I eat. It's ridiculous. I never used to worry about that. And now I have to worry about what I put into my physical body. I don't personally give too much thought about the way I'm thinking. And I've tried mindfulness and don't get on with it. Running works for me. Coaches finding a way to reflect about the way they're thinking in their own brain. That makes a lot of sense to me. And then how they can help their clients to think about that. I think that makes huge amounts of sense, actually.
If I'm just going to share something with you that I wasn't going to share, and I haven't really shared with very many people. It's quite personal and quite confidential. But so halfway through my dissertation, I actually had a stroke, which was quite massive and quite a shock, as you can imagine. But my surgeons they were amazed about how, and I'm recovered very quickly. It hit my thalamus, so it could have been quite disastrous. But I swear it was because I had a relationship with my brain. I understood exactly what was going on in my brain. I knew what was happening. I knew what areas were being affected. I knew how, if I just connected back with it and talked with my own brain, again, it's that separate thing, isn't it? My surgeons were really quite surprised by it. But when I explained to them what I did and what I was actually studying, they got it. And I don't really want to make too much of that. I got my master's and I got through it. But it was the big help for me was to actually be able to understand what was going on and be able to talk to myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I wasn't aware, obviously, and I'm glad that you've recovered. And I'm glad that the way that you think about thinking has probably had a real influence on your ability to recover so quickly. And I'm sure that there's learning in that, in terms of that. I've got my brother and others, really fascinated with mind-body links, and to the point sometimes that they challenge some traditional medicines, which, I'm not going to get into that discussion and debate, but the importance is that you're aware and you have that awareness about your mind and about how powerful your mind is. I mean, it's quite incredible when we think about we're sitting here having a conversation and our body's looking after our breathing, our blood and everything else, and it's just doing it unconsciously. It's so incredible, isn't it? And it really is.
Yeah, the whole homeostasis that's going on, and our brain does control everything.
Yep.
It deserves a little bit of love your brain. Maybe we should have a hat like that or something like that. I don't know. But actually making us more aware of what's actually in our head.
No, absolutely. I think that would be a really good thing. It's things like drinking water, isn't it? I know that's really important. And it's certainly something that over this lockdown I've been better at doing, and I've not always been good at doing that. I tend to use tea as my water, so it's some of those practical things.
Yeah.
You've got so much insight and wisdom, Soraya, you really have. And, when you look out for our profession going forwards over the next 10, 15, 20, 25 years, go as far out as you want. What do you see as some of the kind of opportunities that we've got to serve the planet? You talked earlier about sustainability and ethics and things like that and how important those are. Completely agree with that.
Okay. Very good question. I suppose the wish is that because of the knowledge that we have as coaches and our real care about people and their lives and how well or badly they live them, it is about giving people the insights and the space to talk and think and reflect that actually will make our society and our planet and our futures better places to be. Business is very important, but again, business has changed. It's very interesting. I was doing some work last year actually with a travel company that's obviously been having a hard time. And what they actually reflected back on was that everybody's been growing and growing. That's been the mantra for the past, 10, 15, 20 years for business. And actually, where are we growing to? And I think there's some reflection that we can give our clients and that knowledge and the challenge, actually, the real stretch for them to actually say, where are we going as a society? What is this race for growth? What does it mean? And this person in particular realized that they had just grown and grown and grown without any thought or any celebration for what they were doing, or they'd just never given themselves the chance to think. So I think our future as coaches is to keep building our knowledge, keep learning, keep growing, being curious, really being very diverse in our thinking and supporting our clients to do that. I think we can be a conduit for how we want to see the world, make the world. It sounds cheesy, doesn't it? It's not. How we want to make the world a better place. How do you want to leave it for your children, for your grandchildren, for the animals, because what we've been doing so far hasn't really been doing very much good. We have an opportunity to redress that balance.
Yeah, and I think we should have no embarrassment with that. Similar to what you were sharing around emotions in organisations and emotions in life, we're becoming more comfortable, more mature as a human species. And I think us as a profession, we shouldn't shy away from the fact that we care about humanity and this planet. And I think it's really important. I think we've got a huge responsibility to help people think, because coaches are brilliant at helping people to raise their awareness, their consciousness and their maturity levels. And our leaders in all guises, need that. I think we should celebrate that and not shy away from it. I think it's really essential.
It's sharing that wisdom, isn't it? I think in my eyes, coaches have a lot of wisdom because of, I think, their nature, what they learn, what they do, the people they meet, the conversations, the insights they have. And it is, I think, sharing wisdom. I'd like to think that I do that moving forward.
Yeah. I know Catherine will absolutely align with you around that. And I completely align with that. But more wisdom in the world is only going to be a good thing. So brilliant. So I've really enjoyed this conversation. So for those people that are listening to this that really would like to find out more about neuroscience and coaching, where can they go and have a look? And then also for people that would like to get in contact with you, how do they find you?
Okay, people can... They want to know more about coaching, more about neuroscience. My website, www.springboardtribe.com, has got a lot of information on. My email's on there. I'm more than happy for people to email me directly. I have actually, we'll probably be doing in the summer, some sort of modules on the basics of neuroscience for our profession and counsellors and psychotherapists and the whole wonderful group of people out there who are caring and supporting other people. So please get in touch with me. What I'll do actually is I do a newsletter. I'll actually start putting together a list of other places that people can go for information and books and a kind of resource for them. And I don't know whether, I'm sure Professor Brown's got some stuff on his website. But please get in touch with me. More than happy. And as I say, people want something, I'll put something together. I'll get off being lazy and actually do something.
I don't think you're ever lazy. We'll make sure that we share some of those links, obviously, on the web pages that we use for these podcasts.
Of course, yeah, I can send them to you. Yeah,
that's brilliant. Yeah. And we'll direct people to you. It's been wonderful to reconnect with you and to hear about your recent addition to your knowledge base. So thanks ever so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, Darren, it's been great. It's great to speak to you again as well. Good.
Thanks ever so much.